I'm sorry that this video is a week late. I was a bit poorly last week, but here I am. Today, this week in the Regency, we're looking at the other kind of horse that was used for quite heavy work. And it may surprise you because it's ponies. Ponies were one of the key elements of Regency life. In two main areas, leisure and industry. We're going to look at both of those. So we're jumping off point is the Salisbury and Winchester Journal, horses for sale. A very good bay horse, 15 hands at an inch high, 7 years old. We'll explain about hands in a minute. Trots very fast and is warranted quite in harness. Price 40 guineas. Also an excellent pony, 13 hands high, 7 years old, warranted as safe to ride and drive and has been used to carry a lady. Price 22 guineas. So not cheap. A handsome Shetland pony being sold in Leeds. Ready and free from vice. That means it doesn't bite you. Very proper to carry a boy or young lady. Inquire of Mr. James Clay, Horsebreaker, Leeds. So 22 guineas is quite a lot of money. Good ponies were expensive. Let's talk about, though, what is a pony, just so that we're all on the same page, because not all of us are horse people. So there are two kind of characteristics, two ways you can define a pony. One is by size and the other is by breed. The size, here's an example of the difference in sizes between horses of different kinds. Clydesdale, we talked about last time in the Horses for Heavy Work video. You can go and have a look at that if you're more interested. We'll get to Arabians and English thoroughbreds later in the series. And you can see that the Shetland pony is significantly smaller. But how much smaller? Okay, this is where it gets technical. Bear with me. A pony is a horse of any kind, any breed, that is under 14.2 hands high. A hand is 4 inches. It's like this, a man's hand wide, 4 inches wide. And each point, it goes 13.1, 13.2, 13.3, 14. So each point is an inch. So a 14.2 hands high horse is just a pony, only like right on that borderline between pony and horse. It's 4 foot 10 inches. But you look at things and you go, hold on, they're bigger than that, right? That's because they're not being measured from the head, where the head is, because the head goes up and down. They're being measured from the withers, which is where that circle is there. And all horses are measured from there. So where it said in the earlier one that it was a 15 hands horse, that's where it would have been measured from. So any horse can technically be a pony if it's 14.2 or lower, under 14.2. But then there are whole breeds of horses, ponies, which are pretty much all under that. And they've been bred to be small. They've been bred to be small for particular reasons. Sometimes just because, as in the case of the Shetland pony, island breeds tend to be smaller than mainland breeds. That's just a thing that evolution does, because there are fewer resources on an island. And others because they were specifically bred to do things where a small size small but strong was useful. So let's look at some of the breeds. Now, this is only like touching the top of the number of breeds, particularly in the Regency. A lot of heritage horse breeds disappeared during the last 200 years. And these are the ones that were either very useful or very cute. and so people kept them, or because they already had a really strong breeding pool in the area, and they didn't get mixed up with other horses or ponies. So these are some of the breeds of horses of ponies that were around during the Regency. And they're so cute. Most people know what a Shetland pony is. I'll come to that last because they are really the kind of quintessential pony. The Dales pony, how gorgeous is that? Often black all over. The Welsh cob. Now, a cob is a horse that's just a little bit bigger than a pony. So Welsh, this is an example. It's a very similar. The Welsh cob and the pony, they only vary by 4 inches roughly. The fell pony, isn't it gorgeous? See how heavy the coat is? That's because it's cold up there on the fells. And there's quite a lot of feathering also. And feathering is there as an evolutionary response to cold. So you can see a lot more of it on the fell pony. The Connemara pony from Ireland, very gorgeous, dappled. And then we're looking, of course, at the classic Shetland. Now, what did you use ponies for in the Regency? It's quite different to now. Now we're looking at something like this. This is Renoir 1873, Victorian rather than Regency, but it's such a gorgeous image. I wanted to share it with you. And we can see here the relative sizes of a pony for children versus a horse for an adult. And so ponies were then and are still used as mounts for small people, whether that's a slight girl, a young lady, or children. And they were also used, you've probably heard the term pony trap. They seem to be all over Victorian novels. This is a pony trap. You can also drive it with one pony. Usually there's only one person in it, or one person and a child in it for one pony. Quite a lot of people use ponies to get around because they were, first of all, cheaper to buy, but second, or really importantly, much cheaper to feed because they're smaller. So a lot of people who had not a huge amount of need, like going down to the village or going to church was about all they did in terms of getting out and about. A pony trap would suit a small household quite well and would be a lot cheaper. And the tax, of course, was much cheaper on a pony than it was on a horse. So those were the kind of like the rich people's way. I mean, you have to be reasonably well off to keep a pony trap unless you were a farmer. Most farms had at least one pony, often used for hauling loads, often used for pony trap or cart. But in the general population, outside of rural areas, outside of people who could afford to keep ponies for fun, ponies were really important industrially. And probably the most famous of these were the pit ponies. And we know about pit ponies because we're so appalled by the fact that these ponies were literally taken down into the mine, and they lived there for months at a time, sometimes lived and died there. And obviously, it's much better for the mine to have a small horse that can carry, they pulled loads when you have such a low ceiling. And they're still really strong compared to people. Like a pony can pull a lot more than a man. Remembering also when we're looking at this that yes, the miners were hunched over quite often, but that most people in the Regency weren't as tall as we are today. because they didn't get enough protein when they were little. So that was one of the markers of the aristocracy, was that they were tall. And they were tall because they got fed properly when they were children, whereas most people weren't. So it's obviously horrible. We don't like this at all. We don't like the idea of animals being treated like this, and it really highlights the difference in attitudes towards animal welfare then and now. In most of the pits for a lot of the time up until the 1840s, the ponies were often looked after by girls, young women. They were called pit girls, and they were responsible for guiding the ponies in, like to look after them. They looked after them and mucked them out and carried them down and all that kind of stuff. And they were responsible for letting them in and out of the mine, in mines in where you could actually pull, where it wasn't a lift, where it wasn't an elevator to get the stuff up. They actually walked the ponies in and out of the mine and were responsible for them during the day. And there was in the early Victorian period, there were a number of investigations into working conditions, and one of them was into pits. And there's a fantastic description of the pit girls, where they smoked, drank, swore, and cared for nobody. I love the pit girls. Unfortunately, of course, they decided, as a consequence of that report and others, to forbid women working in the mines, and all those girls lost their jobs. Probably ended up in the factories. But it wasn't the only place that ponies were used. Ponies were used to mill. They were used to thresh, mill, for example, to mill malted barley in breweries. The Whitbread brewery, when it replaced its ponies with an engine in 1775. They replaced it with a Bolton and Watt steam engine, which is currently on display in Sydney at the Powerhouse Museum. They replaced 24 ponies. So there were 24 ponies working at the brewery using this kind of mill, but much larger, obviously, to grind the malted barley into malt. And there were lots and lots and lots of industries. So where there were anything that needed going round and round, this kind of contraption was used. You could use it to raise and lower things. They were used as lifts quite often they were used as elevators. You know, they would go forward to bring something up and then go backwards to let it down. They were used in all kinds of places, and they were used in the way that mules and donkeys are used in other places. In Britain, it was mostly ponies. There were some donkeys, but the British pony breeds were just as strong as the donkeys and more hardy, because they had evolved in that climate. So ponies were everywhere, but not necessarily where you could see them. They were in factories, they were in mines, they were on farms, they were all over the Regency world, and they kept everything running. Sometimes being badly treated on the way, but quite often being treated well because they were an asset to the business. And so they were treated well because it was more expensive to replace them than it was to treat them well. It's all about the money, even with ponies. So that's our second Horses of the Regency. In the next Horses of the Regency, it won't be for a couple of months. I'll be traveling soon. And I'll be giving you short updates on my travels as I discover interesting things. But the next Horses of the Regency won't be for a couple of months when I get back. And then we're going to be looking at the English Thoroughbred. I'll see you there. I'm Elizabeth Layden. That's This Week in the Regency.